Back with our full allotment here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast as we welcome Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network back from his vacation. Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. Thank you for joining us here for the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast as we are now officially in football season. Training camp opening today for quarterbacks and rookies for the Kansas City Chiefs. We break it all down for you. What should we expect? First of all, they didn't make a move for DeAndre Hopkins. He's a Tennessee Titan. Did the Chiefs get it right? Based upon what he ended up getting with the Titans, the Chiefs rankings in the NFL Executives top 10 rankings, ESPN polled executives in the NFL and came up with the top 10 at each position. Where do the Chiefs fall on this list? First things we're looking at in training camp. We'll talk about that. Patrick Mahomes on Netflix. It's the number one show on Netflix. Any new thoughts on Chris Jones? Breaking down the Chiefs quarterback depth chart. We're going to break down each and every position for the Kansas City Chiefs before the season begins. We start where else? The most important position of football. I think we know what there is with Patrick Mahomes, but we're going to find out what they got beyond Patrick Mahomes. It's all coming up right now on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You're listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions. Project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience. With paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here are the hosts of the best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
And thank you for joining us. Remember, if you're catching us later in the week via the podcast, you can be a part of the conversation. That's right there in the chat room here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. We go live at 8 p.m. Central on Tuesdays. That's usually the plan and is the plan this week if you ended up missing us. And as we said, we welcome back Jeff Chadiha from vacation. Jeff, how was your vacation?
It was wonderful, except that it feels like midnight right now in Italy, where I was at, so I'm still trying to recover from it. But Amalfi Coast, highly recommend it.
Yeah, and where in Italy did you go, my friend?
Amalfi, Sorrento, Positano, Rome, Florence. We covered a lot of ground in about 8-9 days.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
That's impressive. I saw Rome when we were over in Europe, and I'm glad we did. The Vatican was a big stop, right, for my family to go check that out, and we had a great tour there. We did not, though, love the town that is Rome. It's kind of dirty, a lot of graffiti, but the Colosseum was cool. The tourist stuff was cool, but I've been there, done that, I think, for Rome. So I think you got the better part of Italy on your tour. That's fantastic. Eric, how's the greater Georgia area? How was your travels?
It's hot, but I made it back from
Minneapolis,
Minnesota.
Right?
Yeah. So I'm feeling a little warm this week, but it's good. Been at the office, been hanging out with Thomas and the folks at Sumer. So I'm excited.
Well, let's get at it here with the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast and talk about the one that wasn't. Should it have been any different? Jeff, let's start with you. DeAndre Hopkins, 2 years. Reports have it at 26. I think incentives that can take it up towards 30, maybe even a little bit more on that. Is that a price that is too steep for the Kansas City Chiefs? And did they make the right choice to pass?
Yes. Yeah. And I think when this came up, we had a good chuckle about the Chiefs and the Bills being the front runners to get him whenever it was a couple months ago when he became a free agent. And we talked about just receivers and players at this point in their careers. They can talk a lot about wanting to win championships, but the money was always going to be the driving force. And I'm actually more surprised the Patriots didn't make a run at him, given that he was in their building last and walked out. But clearly, Bill Belichick didn't want to pay that kind of money to get him. And so, look, the Titans were desperate for receiver help. If they want to be any kind of player in the AFC playoff race, they have to improve their offense. And the Chiefs don't have to spend that kind of money and probably can't afford to spend that kind of money, to be honest with you, right now, unless Chris Jones' deal got done before this deal went down. So I never thought they were going to be a serious player in this. And I think he landed probably in the best situation for himself.
Yeah. How about you, Eric? You okay with how this played out, and did the Chiefs make the right call?
Yeah. I mean, look, like, I think a lot of fans wanted him, and I understand that. He's one of the best receivers of his generation. So it would make sense from the name perspective that they would want him to bring him into the fold. But like, he was going to, I mean, look, $13 million a year was too much for them, especially considering a significant fraction of the 2 years, $26 million up to $30 million was guaranteed. And that was all that guaranteed money was going to go in addition to a Chris Jones contract, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit. Like, it was just too much for the Chiefs to do in one fell swoop. And they're not a team. Like, look, Jason Fitzgerald on Over the Cap, he had a really good podcast the other day, which talked about the Chiefs, over the last, I believe, 5 years are last in the NFL in total spending. So, it just wasn't in the cards. It's not something that they do as a franchise. And so it didn't make a lot of sense that they would change, especially for a guy who, as Jeff said, talking about 31 years old, kind of hitting the end of the road.
Yeah, and I'll bring this one up here again. Mizzou19 said, I went back and listened to the episode from May 30th, and you guys absolutely nailed the D-Hop saga. And thank you. I appreciate that. It's better for someone else to toot our horn than us to toot our own. So thank you for doing that. But this is pretty much what we thought would happen. It became pretty clear. I think all three of us were hearing similar stuff, that they had offered him kind of the Juju Smith-Schuster deal. More, I think, probably base than the $3 million base that Smith-Schuster got, but that's the deal that they're doing. It's what they did with Donovan Smith, a little less than $3 million base with incentives that can take it upwards of $9 million. And they offered something similar to Juju. That was in the neighborhood that they were at Odell Beckham Jr. If someone was there to blow them out of the water, so be it. The Chiefs had a price that they thought he was worth, and that was going to be it. And I can't fault DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, I know you want to win a championship, but there's a big difference between $5 or $6 million guaranteed and, $26 million guaranteed. I want a Super Bowl ring more than the next guy. Maybe not as much as a guy who's worked out as much as DeAndre Hopkins, but sign me up for the extra $21 million. And I got no hate on that front. Let's talk about the top 10 list. ESPN, I think it was Jeremy Fowler went out, polled executives around the league, had them rank every position 1 through 10, and came back with the rankings of what each team is and what they have. And we're still doing a little bit more work on this. One of my interns was grinding away on it. Kudos to Wet Willie. He's the Wildcat. I'll let you figure out what Willie the Wildcat. Get it? He was grinding away on this, but let's go over this and see if you agree. Gentlemen, let's start on the defensive side for their top 10s. Chris Jones was ranked number 2 at the interior defensive tackles. Nick Bolton at middle linebacker was number 8. My God, Eric, your head must have exploded. I know how much you dislike Nick Bolton. L'Jarius Sneed was an honorable mention. Trent McDuffie was others receiving votes. Okay. And then Justin Reed at safety was others receiving votes. That's where they rank. So only 2 top 10 players on defense, Chris Jones and Nick Bolton. Jeff, what do you think? Did they get it right with the Chiefs defensive personnel on this?
Yeah. Although I don't understand the difference between honorable mention and others receiving votes.
Honorable mention is just like a little bit higher. So how we did it, we gave 12 points to anyone who got first, 11 to second, 10 to third, so on all the way down. So if you were If you were 10th, you got 3 points. And then honorable mention was in their category was higher. So I think you got you got enough to where you almost got into the top 10 is the way I would describe it.
Okay.
And then the others receiving votes, anybody who got any vote of any kind was listed there. So if you got mentioned, you got 1 point. If you got mentioned quite a bit but didn't make the top 10, you got 2 points. And we did it. I'll come up with some of the math on this here in a minute, how the Chiefs compare to other teams, but that's what honorable mention and others receiving votes were. It's kind of like, the other ones after the top 25 and on the AP poll, like, oh, look, we would have been 31st. If we had those numbers, we could have figured out deeper, but they didn't give those numbers.
Got it. No, they got it right. I mean, we've talked about this before with their defense. It's not a star-driven unit, kind of a no-name group, and a really young group when you really think about it. I mean, there's a lot of guys who either haven't played a whole lot in the NFL or, like Charles Omenihu, are just not that established as players. So the only other guy who I could think of, who you mentioned, was Snead being able to crack the top 10. And corner's a really tough spot to do that at. I mean, we said this before, why he hasn't been a Pro Bowl player when you've got the Marlon Humphreys, you've got the Patrick Surtains, other worlds, Jalen Ramsey. I was surprised that Surtain was the number one corner in this bunch. But, yeah, I think that group is pretty much where it should be. Bolton and Chris Jones are about it for top 10 players.
Hey, Eric, I know I give you a hard time about Nick Bolton, but he cracks the top 10 on this list. I know you might have some frustrations with that. I know you don't hate Nick Bolton, but you what did you call him? Tracy Simeon part 2?
Yeah, Tracy Simeon's a good player.
Yeah. Did they get it right? Chris Jones at number 2. That feels pretty easy. I think there'd be more of an argument about whether or not he's number 1 than there would be whether or not he's number 3. Bolton, and then the others getting the votes. Honorable mention for Snead, McDuffie, and Reed getting some votes in the equation at corner and safety. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, like these are the stars of this defense. I think Bolton, I mean, like Bolton's in a position, I think, where there's not that many, great players. I'm not trying to root for my prediction here, but I feel like that's, he probably is deserving of that number. I think Snead is, a very deserving player, probably too versatile, I think, to get, with Surtain, for example, being the first corner. I think that's because he's like the traditional shutdown guy, whereas a guy like Ramsey is kind of a play everywhere guy. And I think those players in the eyes of the voters get dinged a little bit. So I think that's a similar thing with L'Jarius Sneed as well. McDuffie, Reed. I don't know if Reed necessarily, is a great safety, but I think interesting that he got a vote or two. So yeah, I mean, a lot of this makes sense on the defensive side of the ball. The question is, Petro, of course, we talked about 3 Pro Bowlers. Like, does this get them there? Like, can you get a Pro Bowler out of a 2 and 8, an honorable mention, and 2 receiving votes?
I think you can, because I think that's where they are. Now we've done some other, further checks, and I'd have to go back because I should open up the list. You can go back and look at past years for this, and that's one of the things we're doing is quantifying. Like, okay, if you add all these numbers up, do the most talented rosters end up turning into the playoff teams all the time? Like, is this a good indicator of in-season success, or do they end up missing? Is it just a good indicator of what the past was and a bad look ahead? I don't know. We're still grinding through those numbers, and maybe we'll talk more about that later on. But does it foretell that? If you figure half of each 10 is on each conference, maybe gets Nick Bolton in there. Maybe not, because there's only going to be one middle linebacker. No, I don't think this, because I was one that was bullish on 3 Pro Bowlers for the Chiefs defense. No, I don't think this in and of itself says that they're going to get there. What it makes me wonder a little bit, though, is on the Snead side of things, do we see a little bit more of him sliding towards safety? Right? Like, we're going to talk about Chris Jones' contract, but we're not talking at all about L'Jarius Snead. And he's in the final year of his deal. And maybe this is something the Chiefs like. His agents can't go, look, he's one of the top 10 corners. Other NFL executives say, like, this to me, Jeff, would be somewhat of a powerful, most things we put out there in the media, I don't know how much juice you can get behind it if you're an agent, but this is a poll done of NFL executives. This, I would think, would help the Chiefs in contract negotiations as far as if Snead's thinking I'm going to be paid like a number 1 corner. This would at least return that, no, he doesn't deserve number 1 corner money, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Are you suggesting that – are you talking about the possibility of him staying with the Chiefs as a safety, or just going on the open market after
Well,
next year?
I'm glad you point that up, because that was a really poorly constructed sentiment there. It's two sentiments. One, I wondered, were they thinking, like, because when they drafted another corner this year, albeit late, but they draft a lot of corners late and do pretty good, was the idea that the replacement for Juan Thornhill isn't Brian Cook. Cook is going to play what Cook played last year. The replacement and Cook is maybe the replacement on down the road for Justin Reed when he becomes more expensive and they can cut him. But that L'Jarius Sneed is the replacement for Juan Thornhill, and he will play more of a safety. That was one thought. And then I, of course, mush-mouthed it with the idea of, though they got to give him a contract after this year, if he does play corner, does this give them some ammunition and say, and other NFL executives don't see as a top 10 corner, so don't ask us for top 10 corner money?
Yeah, I think that the Chiefs, I think their recent history suggests that L'Jarius Sneed won't be here after this year, that they are not going to invest the kind of money it would take to have him be a corner on this team.
Will it take big money, do you think, or does this reflect that he doesn't have that giant market out there?
Well, look, Juan Thornhill got 3 years, $21 million to play safety in Cleveland. I mean, if he gets in the open market, he's going to have people bidding for his services. And I just feel like the Chiefs, if they're going to spend money, it's going to be on the defensive line. They're going to rely a lot on Steve Spagnuolo to trick up the coverages on the back end, and they will just throw bodies at the secondary. And so I'm a big L'Jarius Sneed fan. I think he's got a lot of versatility, but I also feel like they've never really been big on the idea of spending a ton of money on that side of the football, which every team, once you get to the place where you are with a highly paid quarterback, has to pick the side of the football they're going to spend the bulk of their money on. And so I don't think it really matters what people are saying about L'Jarius Sneed. The question that I think this poll really reaffirms is, do you think he's one of the top 5 most important players on this roster?
Yeah.
and he's not.
Well, and here's the question. I actually am like struggling to think of this off the top of my head. When's the last time the Chiefs let somebody get to free agency and re-sign them to a deal that was more than like a DeMarcus Robinson 1 year, $4 million club exemption? Like, to Soren's point, if he gets to the open market, he'll probably have a market. The issue is to Jeff's point, if the Chiefs let him get to the market, he's gone. So I think that's the whole thing. Is I think that what the Chiefs will do is go and maybe offer him $10 million a year or something reasonable for them during the season. And however L'Jarius Sneed is playing during that time will determine whether or not he accepts it. But if he doesn't take it, they're not going to be like, oh, I'm sorry, $12 million. I think that's just not how they operate. We saw that with McCole Hardman. We saw that with Juan Thornhill. We've seen that with a number of free agents that the Chiefs have deemed, too expensive. I mean, Charvarius Ward, the last one, $14 million APY from the San Francisco 49ers. I feel like that's probably going to be more the market for L'Jarius Sneed.
I was looking up on previous years to put a value on what L'Jarius Sneed will get. Jeff, to your point that if he gets out there, someone's going to pay him. And I do agree, because even if you're not the top 10, everybody needs at least 3 of them. And I'm looking to see where Charvarius Ward ranked on these lists. He did not rank anywhere in 20 or 21, and he ended up getting a big contract. L'Jarius Sneed last year was likewise again on the let me see. I think he was again honorable mention last year as well. So he's shown some consistency. Also receiving votes, L'Jarius Sneed. So he bumped up from others receiving votes to honorable mention. So the arrow's trending up. I'm with Eric, Jeff. There isn't a time. They make their decision going into the year whether or not they want the guy, right? Like, and the fact that he's not signed now, veterans haven't reported yet. So could we see a wild card and no L'Jarius Sneed at camp? Do you think there's any chance that happens?
No, he'll be there.
He has 4th round pick money, and the fines are immense for these things. So no, I mean, no player on a rookie deal will hold out anymore.
Okay. All right, let's move on to where we go next. That is on the offensive side of the ball. Patrick Mahomes, stunning, the number 1 quarterback. By the way, up. Do you know who was number 1 last year?
Josh Allen.
This would be coming off the 21 season. Josh
Allen.
Allen.
Aaron Rodgers.
Jeff?
21 season. I'd say
Don't hurt yourself. It's been mentioned.
Oh, it has Josh Allen.
No, Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
So as a predictive tool, it
MVP,
didn't work out really well. But Patrick Mahomes is number one in this one. Isaiah Pacheco does not crack any one of the teams for running back. None of their wideouts. I don't think this would shock any of us. Crack the wide receiver list. Travis Kelce's number one. At tight end, at tackle, Jawan Taylor. Others receiving votes for Jawan Taylor. And on the interior, and they put guard and centers together. Joe Tooney, number 2, Creed Humphrey, number 8. Again, guards and centers all lumped in together. And then Smith, honorable mention on the interior. So 4 of their 5 offensive linemen are at least mentioned in one way, shape, or form. Tooney, number 2 at the guard. Humphrey, 8 in the interior. And then Smith, honorable mention. Jawan Taylor gets others receiving votes. Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, number 1. I don't think there'll be a major argument, unless maybe it's where some of the linemen fit in. Jeff, do you have a beef with any of these?
No, if anything, it's more evidence of why Mahomes won the MVP last year, right? He wasn't playing with a star-studded outfit like he had earlier in his career, and in a lot of ways, he had to elevate the talent around him, especially at the receiver position, for this team to win a championship. So, yeah, everything pretty much lines up with what you would expect from the offensive line. Maybe Creed Humphrey would be ranked a little bit higher at center, maybe in the top 5. But otherwise, no, I think this is the group that he's had around him that is pretty good outside of Kelce, but not fantastic.
Okay. What do you think about the offense, Eric?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. The offensive line is where they put a lot of their investment, a lot of their stock, and the skill position players outside of Kelce are all trying to be better. We talked about it on your show yesterday, Petro. It's like they're all the wide receivers. You're kind of underestimating all of them at once and overestimating the group.
Let me ask you a question. Looking back at last year's list, so let me sum up the thoughts, because I'll give you just a little bit of numbers to fly around here on this year's list. So the Chiefs overall, if you add it up, and again, this is our own way of assigning a mathematical value to it. This is not ESPN's. This is how we went about it on my radio show doing it. Chiefs defensive total 20, offensive total 43 for a total of 63. That is the highest number for anybody in the AFC. Second best AFC team by talent. The Buffalo Bills came in with a 50. That makes pretty good sense, right? I don't think anybody would be like, oh my God, that's stunning. Bills are a talented football team. Down in the NFC, and again, I mentioned the Chiefs had a 63. In the NFC, 2 teams eclipsed the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, this is not counting quarterback as any more valuable than any other position. Philadelphia Eagles come in 68 total points. The 49ers, 79. You okay with those being the rosters that are listed as more talented by this method, Jeff?
Yeah. I mean, just looking at the overall list, that what those 2 teams, the Chiefs had 6 players who were top 10 players, and the Niners and the Eagles both had 8 players, and there was nobody on either list with those NFC teams that I would argue against. I was a little surprised that maybe Jalen Hurts didn't crack the top 5, but Eric Sky, Justin Herbert pushed him out, pushed him down to 6. But overall, those teams, you look at their rosters and the way they're constructed, that's what you're going to have when you have a quarterback. Now, Hurts is now obviously getting paid more money, but that's when you have a quarterback that's not a big, highly paid guy, you're going to have more talent around him. I mean, those teams on paper look amazing.
Tell me, Eric, do they get it right on this? Are you okay with those 2 rosters being listed as more talented?
Yeah, I agree. I think when you look at even going into
your timing for taking a bite is awful.
Sorry, my bad.
Did you not hear Jeff wrapping up?
Okay. I think that they were. Look, those are the 2 best teams in the league if you take away quarterback. So, and those 2 teams are always in it at the end. I think the Eagles, it might get, I think for some teams it might get a little fair once you have to start paying the quarterback. But for now, I can't really dispute that.
if I were to fix this, how many times would you value the quarterback? Like at that position, how many times should I take it? Times 2, 3, 4, 5, what?
Times 2.
Times 2? All right. We'll run the numbers back times 2. I wanted to tell you what it was last year. We know the Super Bowl ended up being the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Philadelphia Eagles. Coming in, so going into last year, they were looking back off 21. The Chiefs had a 48. So clearly winning the Super Bowl is giving some kiss to their teams. Last year's Chiefs, Chris Jones was number 3. Nick Bolton, others receiving votes. L'Jarius Sneed, others receiving votes on defense. Patrick Mahomes was the number 2 quarterback. Travis Kelce was the number 2 tight end. Orlando Brown Jr., honorable mention on the offensive line. Joe Thuney was 4th interior. Honorable mention for Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith was others receiving votes. So basically the same guys, minus 2 DBs on the Chiefs defensive side of the ball. Overall, the Chargers were listed as a more talented team than the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC. The Colts had better talent than the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC.
Well, that's because it's not like position adjusted. Like the Colts are really good at guard and linebacker and interior defensive line and safety. We're happy for them running back. We're happy for them. That's why you won 4 games last year.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Other teams that overall had a higher number, in other words, based on this very simplistic system of grading, the 49ers had more talent. The Rams just barely were listed as more talent. The Bucks, more talent. They did make the playoffs after a very disappointing start. Packers, more talent than the Kansas City Chiefs. So
you didn't even say Detroit. It's like the true talent in the NFC right now.
I did not say the Lions. In fact, the Lions, you want to hear just for shoots and giggles? No one on offense, or excuse me, no one on defense. Hawkinson, who they traded, listed as the 7th best tight end. Sewell and Ragnow, honorable mention. That's it. That's all the Lions got.
Underestimating Jared Goff. Jared Goff, one of the 6 quarterbacks who's ever played in February in the league right now. Just want to diss him like that.
Wow, is that right?
Yeah, who's pissed to use your phrase? Who's pissed to drop in February in this league right now?
Well,
Rodgers once, Stafford once, Mahomes, 3 times, Goff once, Burrow once, Garoppolo, I guess, is a starter once. It's not that many. I think it's like 6 or 7.
Yeah, well, Tom Brady had a lot of them. I don't know if he can.
Yeah, that's the point.
We lost guys that carried a lot of them. By the way, we're proudly brought to you here on the Red Gold and Bold podcast by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the entire KC Metro. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, KC's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear in KC since 1994 with free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project coming with a written warranty. You can find them online right now at GannAsphalt.com. Why wouldn't you call 816-484-3338, Gann Asphalt and Concrete? One contractor, all things parking lot. Let's talk a little bit about what we want to see at training camp, Jeff. What's something that you definitely want to see at training camp this year?
I want to see how Chris Jones' situation plays out. That's one thing. I guess I feel like it's certainly with Quinnen Williams getting done, it's in a much more interesting space in terms of there's not anybody left to get done. And now you got this gap between Quinnen Williams and Aaron Donald to fill. I know we'll talk about Chris Jones probably pretty soon in this podcast. So that's one thing. And I'm also curious how the receivers look. I think last year you went into it knowing that Juju Smith-Schuster was the most proven commodity in that group. And the only real question about him was whether he would stay healthy. And he was able to do that for the most part. Missed a couple games here and there, but he did what he had to do and produce when he had to. But this group is a lot harder to measure, and I think I'm more curious about how they're going to play because the body types are a lot more similar with this group than they were last year. Where you had Juju was a bigger body guy. You still have MVS. You could see certain guys filling certain roles. Now it feels more like, I'm not trying to be facetious here, but just it feels like a run and shoot type offense. a lot of Smurfs running around out there. So I'm curious to see what Andy's going to do with this group.
Well, Jeff, it's like a really interesting point you made, though. Like, it was Juju kind of the wild card? Because, we've always talked about Chiefs receivers, and it's like, we've had the random Kelvin Benjamins and Josh Gordon, Soren's guy. and a bunch of but for the most part, to succeed in Kansas City as a wide receiver, you almost have to be a Smurf kind of like Miles Davis, June Jones wide receiver, like historically. And Juju was like the random big guy that for once did something in this offense since Dwayne Bowe, Jeremy Maclin-ish, right? Like that's like kind of the last receiver in Kansas City that had success as like a, bigger bodied receiver. Even Maclin wasn't that big.
Listen, for me on the receiver side, I want to see if Kadarius Toney's going to actually run routes. Right now, my expectation is that he's just going to be a feature piece, catching the ball within a few yards of the line of scrimmage, reverses, those kind of things. I don't see it. But I hope to be proven wrong and to be like, oh wow, there's an up, in, out, and he's in perfect step with where Patrick Mahomes wanted him to be. Like, if that happens, because the physical ability is there, that he could be a dynamic guy. But he's for all his big jump cuts and everything, it's real awkward, right? Like even the jump cuts,
like twisted his own ankle in the AFC title game.
And
what are we doing here?
I just don't know how fluid it's going to be. You guys not loving, but I predicted Sky Moore would be the guy that would take the step forward. I would love to see that second wide receiver. Your receivers are it. I think that's a big part of it. But can we talk about the fact that Isaiah Pacheco, Andy Reid cautioned a little bit today. He was asked, okay, Pacheco, they weren't sure where he was going to be. Would he be ready to start the season? He said, well, we'll see about that. So leaving the door open, I don't think that means he won't, because I think Andy Reid, plays his cards pretty close. But I wouldn't mind seeing Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the right mindset. I'm not calling calling for any numbers. But listen, Isaiah
Pacheco, before we let you get on a Clyde Edwards-Helaire,
let me finish. Yeah. Let me finish one time, Eric. Let somebody finish the thought. I'm saying Isaiah Pacheco was great, and he took over and did a fantastic job. Something neither Eric nor I thought was going to happen. Let's be clear. We're both happy to admit when we were wrong. But Pacheco needed labrum surgery and hand surgery at the end of the year. He's not carrying the ball 250 times. Somebody's going to have to complement in the pure running style. I don't think they want to pound the rock with McKinnon. I think they like McKinnon as the third down guy. They needed all three guys last year. I think in all likelihood, they're going to need the two guys, Pacheco and McKinnon, but somebody else. If it's not him, fine. It doesn't have to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire looking decent. And he's played decent football for this team, by the way. Let's add that in here. He has not been a total zero. Whether it's him or somebody else, do we agree? They're not getting to the finish line, Jeff, I don't think, with Pacheco and McKinnon. Do you?
Getting to the finish line meaning what? Winning a championship?
Just those two running backs.
Oh, no.
Guys.
Yeah. Distance. Oh, yeah. You need to have somebody be who was the guy 2 years ago? Daryl, what was his last name?
Daryl Williams.
You need a Daryl Williams type guy who can be that third option for you. And so I agree with you. I don't think that Clyde is completely.
Second, Eric, he agrees with me.
Yeah, completely dismissed because there's an opportunity there. But what I don't know is, will someone else grab it? Will he be able to deliver and be able to? Where's his head at? And is he okay? Because it's for a guy who was a first round pick who was supposed to be the number one option in that position, 2-3 years ago, to be in a situation where he's fighting to be the third guy. It could still be a huge mental obstacle to get over.
Eric, LaMichael Pirine, Deneric Prince, fashion shows on either coast. There are things that could get in the way of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right?
Firstly, we need to talk about Red, Gold, and Bold, the best Chiefs podcast. Today's news months ago, right? We talked about on this show that Isaiah Pacheco was not going to be the next, Frank Gore in terms of season after season after season. And again, this is not me saying that Pacheco sucks. He does not suck. I was wrong about that. But these things happen, right? You're a 7th round pick for a reason. And this idea that he was going to come in and be the next, the next great runner in Chiefs history, of course, we're off to a great start here in year 2. Look, I bet with you, I bet the Clyde Edwards-Helaire over 749 and a half yards last year. I figured even a guy of his caliber could get 750 yards rushing in this league. And, he was spectacular. You watch the Patrick Mahomes documentary, he's in a lot of those plays early in the season. He wasn't not making plays. He just was worse than the guy in front of him and then got hurt. So there's a chance that he could come do it for sure. I mean, the whole reason we're doing this running back, thing, as far as why, guys like Barkley and Jacobs and all of them are not getting paid is because guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire go from being terrible to good all the time. And that's 100% could happen to the Chiefs this year.
Can we just take a moment to acknowledge this? Tommy said, are they live tonight? And apparently the only guy in the chat room each week who can't figure it out is Tommy. Here, Beery Mister. Thomas, yes, they're live. If we're putting up the comments, Tom, I mean, we're live. We're usually live, people. But if there are no comments, I'll give you a quick rule of thumb. If I don't post comments from the chat room live, then we're not live.
Petro's out here Petro's dragging Thomas. This is not your fault. He's projecting his pissy mood against Twitter on you.
Oh, got it.
And like he's just projecting onto you, Tommy. I know, it was a dumb comment, but it wasn't 8 dumb comments. The size of your anger towards Mr. Lester over here.
Listen, unlike you, when I say Tommy, I love you, he knows I love him. I've known Tommy a long time, and he's a great friend of the program.
I don't lie. I've never said it, so I can't be accused of lying.
Yeah, you can't be accused of lying, but I just that Tommy's always fascinated by whether or not we're live, and like there's an easy way to tell if we're putting things up in the chat from the chat room, we're in. I mean, if nothing ever goes up, it's just our 3 mugs. Somebody was traveling, we had to record. It's
we're all wearing the same shirt that we wore the last episode. Right. We're going live. What are we doing here?
It's not a mystery wrapped in an enigma. I mean, it's pretty easy to tell. There, yeah, I like that. Very good.
Is my hair like a week's longer than it was last time? Yes, we're live. There's all these clues.
Yeah, there's all these clues to it. All right, anything on the D line? I'll tell you one other thing I'd like to see. I want to see Charles Omenihu winning some one-on-one battles, right? I want to see him. He's going to go up against a really good interior line on some of the interior pass rush drills. And so if he's getting some wins, we just mentioned all 3 of their guys are at least honorable mention or better in the top 10. I think Creed Humphrey's the best center in football. And so if you're getting some wins in there and some of those, I'll feel real good that, Chiefs got something here because they've got 2 first-round picks on the edge, albeit not high first-round picks, but still 2 first-round picks theoretically on the edge whenever Felix Ndike and DK Uzama is ready to step in. And then they would have Omenihu, who, a friend of the pod, Seth Kaiser, is really big on, loves his pass rush snaps that he's looked at on his tape. If I see Omenihu looking pretty good, then I think the defensive line should be pretty good. I mean, I think that's going to be a pretty strong indicator. If I see him just getting trucked, then I'm going to be like, oh, this is why the Niners only played him 15 snaps a game, right? So, I mean, I think they've got a real investment in him. He needs to I'm going to feel better if early in camp I see some signs of success there.
Yeah, you don't want him to be Jaron Reed from a couple of years. Remember that Andy Reid could not stop talking about Jaron Reed during the preseason, and Jaron Reed was on milk cartons. Just couldn't find the guy after that point.
I will say he had a lot of similarities with Michael Bennett when you look at athleticism, size, you look at the age in which he had his first good year, you look at kind of the inside-outside flexibility. So he's a base, base end and then an interior rusher But, the fact is this team struggles an awful lot against the run. And when I think about Chris Jones and Omenihu as the 2 tackles on anything other than 3rd and long, I'm scared because I don't think either guy, Chris Jones is a great football player. He can't hold the point of attack like a nose tackle. That is one big question mark I have. Derek Notty's been terrible for 2 straight years.
But don't you feel like? And I'm not gonna steal your thunder here, but don't you feel like that was the purpose of drafting Keandre Coburn? Is I'm not even sure Derek Notty's making the roster.
Yeah, but playing a rookie early is tough, right? And the closer you are to the football, the longer it takes for you to develop. So again, I do think that they're bringing a body in there. I just would temper expectations early on. And again, I think Omenihu is somewhat there in a lot of cases to spell Jones too, because Jones last year was the first season that he's ever played over 1,000 snaps. He first year, presuming he gets a contract extension, which I think we all believe is true, he won't be playing 1,000 snaps this year. I'll just say that.
All right, I'll take that. All right, let's talk a little bit about Patrick Mahomes on Netflix. Jeff, I know you haven't dived into the whole series. My family is through 6 episodes. We have 2 more episodes to go. You know, what is this doing for the Patrick Mahomes brand? For his listen, he can do no wrong in Kansas City. We know that. But what will it do? What could it do? What is it doing for his brand and maybe the view of him around the NFL?
I don't think it's doing much of anything. Just like I've watched the first 2 seasons and half of the first 2 episodes and half of the third, and it's what I thought it was going to be, which is I have a lot of respect for NFL films. Obviously, I'm part of the NFL and working with Netflix on this and Peyton Manning's production company, but it just feels like a lesser Hard Knocks. It feels like a lot of
Lesser?
editing. Yeah.
Lesser.
It's put me to sleep. Yeah, I mean, there's the only interesting storyline is Mariota. Like he's the only guy. Now it's great to have big name quarterbacks like Mahomes and what's his name?
Mariota and Cousins.
Yeah, Cousins. I wanted to say Adam Thielen, but aside from, I mean, they're just showing. All I saw was Patrick Mahomes at a birthday party, at his house after a game, and at a farm with his kids. And for me, that was just like, it was way too much football, to be honest with you. There were a lot of highlights, a lot of things that I've seen before. I didn't learn anything. And I think if you're a hardcore football fan, yeah, you'd be into a hardcore Chiefs fan or Vikings fan or Falcons fan, you'd be into it. But to me, it's like if you and I did a research project and somehow got it on ESPN or something like that, like Eric might be, oh, that's cute, but that's not really all that compelling based on what I can do with my big brain and my skills. And so, it's the same reason I ever watched Tom Brady's Tom versus Time thing. It's just these things big, like, first of all, NFL quarterbacks by nature are pretty vanilla, pretty boring people. They don't say, one guy I've ever met in my entire career who went against that, and that was Brett Favre. Everybody else is just a head coach, spewing, banal comments, and it kind of put me to sleep. So I think for him it was great. For Chiefs fans, it's great, but for me it was, I'd rather watch other things.
Wow. All right, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, look, as somebody who grew up in Minnesota and still has family there and is a Chiefs fan, I kind of knew what to expect. I kind of feel a little bit like Jeff. I do think that there were some things that surprised me in the Cousins. Like, I was very impressed with Kevin O'Connell as a head coach and the way he handled that situation. It is one thing that is interesting that somebody pointed out to me is you do not see Eric Bieniemy much at all in this documentary, which is an interesting narrative on his relationship with Mahomes. It could be nothing, it could be something, but it was interesting to notice that he was out of there. But yeah, I mean, look, Patrick Mahomes is a psycho, but you all you had to do was watch him run for a first down with one leg against the Bengals and then run for 40 yards against the Eagles after he could barely walk off the field at halftime. Like, we all knew he was a sicko, and we all knew that he's a competitive MF or whatever the Eric Bieniemy said, and we all knew Kirk Cousins was a lame, like, boring ass dude who lives his life a different way. So I think, yeah, I'm agreeing with Jeff. I didn't think it was that surprising, but there were some fun parts of it.
A couple of folks right here. Terry's talking about Nagy got more time than EB. See a ton of Matt Nagy. That's been thrown out there. I do think that's a no, because it should be pointed out each one of the quarterbacks had right of editorial on this. So nothing got out there that Kirk Cousins, Marcus Mariota, or Patrick Mahomes didn't want out there.
Wait, and Kirk Cousins' dad's sermons didn't get out there?
It has not. It hasn't yet. No, but there is they're fairly subtle, but it's undeniable that faith is a large part of Kirk Cousins' family's life. I don't know how you guys, I don't think probably as far as I am, but which is fine. I mean, but to your point, Eric, because that's one of the things that gets brought up around him. This from Scott.
Yeah.
Golly, Kirk is a great guy. Gee whiz.
he came off very positively because like I have, for reasons I've joked about, but like I have negative views of him a little bit. And honestly, he came off more humanized him a bunch in that documentary. I will say that.
A lot of people also saying Jeff gets a lot. Tommy said this, and there's one
Yeah.
more. Jeff gets a lot more access to players than the rest of us. So this docuseries is just blah 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 blah. How about that, Jeff? Like for you, this is like what you deal with every time you go in, and you get much more access than even I get with your one-on-ones and sit downs with guys. I mean, I can get into the locker room, but they don't pull me aside as much as they pull you aside. I mean, is it part of this just you're spoiled? Just a
Yeah, for sure. But I also watch a ton of docu-series and, other sports. And I try to, I just think the way the world goes, first of all, unrivaled access has become a catchphrase I can't stand anymore. There was nothing new about the access they had to these guys. But even more so, it's just, I just like stories. Like I'm more jaded because I do this kind of stuff for a living. And so for me, the story that they're trying to tell is about the season and not so much about the individual. So when you're watching, that's why I'm saying Mariota has the most compelling story, because he's the guy we know is in danger of losing his career and has been up and down. It just doesn't resonate in the same way when you're watching a guy like Mahomes, who's been a huge success, or even Cousins, who's found a place and made some money in his career. And it's also a little bit weird when you're watching quarterbacks in a team sport not dealing with a lot of other people around them. I think it would have more weight if you saw them within the context of their teams and not just isolated. I just felt like it was weird watching like Cousins in a hotel room or Mahomes away from, like, he was talking to like players and they weren't even responding to him in some of the clips.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that to me, it just, again, I think it's certainly watchable. It certainly has value. But yeah, I am jaded because I get a lot more access, but I also know that this felt more like inside the NFL type stuff. Just way too much. Hey, on this play, this is what happened, or I missed this guy on this pass that was wide open, and you can't do this. And it just felt like it was too much.
The ribs a lot.
Yeah. I mean, there was like probably 5 or 10 minutes of straight action of games that I've watched before. I'm just like, why am I seeing this again? I'd rather see Mahomes talking about his brother or stuff like that.
I think and his brother is notably absent, at least through 6 episodes. He's been notably absent. I think part of it's they want to, it's to tie it all together. Like, oh, we're talking about all the work they're doing on Kirk Cousins to get him ready to play. Well, here's why, because these are the hits that he's taking, and here's what's going on. I'll push back a little bit. I think it's very, very well done. I think there's some truth to the three of us being a little bit too far on the inside. And so some of this is, maybe something we see anyway, but I think it's really well done. And you mentioned like, oh, it's like a lesser version of Hard Knocks. I'll object there. I mean, maybe you haven't seen the blocking drill before. Congratulations. Get excited when you see him hit the sled this year in New York. But the Jets have said they're not even going to show people getting cut.
Yeah. The regular Hard Knocks.
If you're talking about Marcus Mariota, you're not going to get any of that theme out of the Jets.
True, but I think the thing that Hard Knocks has for it that's compelling is that if you stay up with it, it's live-ish. Where I already know that Pat, took the Chiefs and won the Super Bowl. So like, there's a little bit of that where, but again, I'm with Jeff in that like I'm not offended by it at all, or I wasn't like uber impressed, but I'm also on your side, Petro, where I'm watching it because I do feel like I should, and I think that there is some cool stuff in there. I think
here's a great example. Like they showed the back and forth with Max Crosby in the Raiders game with Mahomes. I would have loved to have seen that interaction that Mahomes had with Bieniemy at halftime, before halftime of the Colts game when they got into it. I would have loved to hear him talk more about that or show things that I had not seen, but it's like clearly they said, that's not going in there. We're not talking about this. Let's just keep it super positive.
I think we are going to have an interesting dynamic, and a couple of people have talked about it. Like, I think it was SH said, the guys were talking here in the chat room about whether or not who's going to be the heavy for Mahomes. Said Nagy won't be the heavy. He gushes too much over Mahomes. And people questioning, like, is there someone? I think it's going to be interesting. Jeff, you've talked a lot about Eric Bieniemy, like being willing to be out, coach somebody hard, and that element's gone, presumably, right? I don't think someone's coming in from the outside. I'm trying to blank. Who is the quarterback coach now? I need somebody to look it up. I don't even remember who it is. But Nagy's not going to be the guy to challenge him on anything. And we've seen that in the little clips we've seen here. But he had, and maybe he'll morph into that because Eric Bieniemy's not there. So he knew he had Bieniemy doing that. So he was good cop out of the two. But I do think that's going to be something interesting. And I think that's something that the show definitely details, that Nagy's his guy, right?
Yeah.
And if Mahomes would go to a whole nother level this year, the perception would be like, oh, when they got Bieniemy riding his ass out of there, boy, look at how they took off. Now, I don't know how much you can take off coming off an MVP season, Super Bowl MVP, and a championship year. It's pretty hard to do that, but I mean, I guess we're going to find out.
Hey, let me ask you this: you remember Derek Jeter's 30 for 30 on ESPN?
Yeah.
How much of that did you watch?
I got bored quick.
Yeah, like this felt like that to me. It was just like great player, but not that interesting. Or all three of the guys. It's kind of like, okay, this is what it's hard to make something like this exciting for someone like me, which I totally agree. I'm a different boat, but
I offer up. I'm a Chiefs fan, have been my whole life, and so how you could give me anything, and maybe I'd just gobble it all up. I don't know. I am open to that as well. So, a couple of things. People, impressed by how much he works out. I mean, I think that is they've shown that it's not a couple of sit-ups and. There's specific training and how they go about it. I think there's some interesting stuff there anyway. We're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. You can be a part of their team. Managers, truck drivers, positions, all positions open. Operators, crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour based upon experience at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Paid time off and insurance, just to name a couple of the benefits. Go to GannAsphalt.com for more information. Any new thoughts real quick before we finish what we think of the quarterback depth chart on Chris Jones? No is a perfectly fine answer, but where we sit here since the last time we talked, I think he tweeted out a video of himself working out. Andy Reid said he wasn't sure if he's going to show up. That says to me he's not. But he said there's good communication there. Any new reaction at all to where we sit with Chris Jones right now, Jeff?
The only thing I would say is that if Quentin Williams is at $24 million and Aaron Donald's at $31 million, I'm guessing Chris Jones probably wants to be at the $27 million mark to get this done.
Yeah. Eric?
Yeah, I agree. I don't have much else to say. I agree with Jeff.
Yeah, I think that's where we find ourselves as well. All right, how about the quarterback position? We'll break it down. We're going to break down each one of the positions leading up to the opener, one each week. We start with the most important position. I think we all know what we think about Patrick Mahomes. We talk a lot about Mahomes. But how about it? Blaine Gabbert, 1 year, $1.3 million, Eric. I mean, listen, he for a backup quarterback, if you could have gotten one for 3.5 someplace else, not bad. Let's go take a shot at winning a ring and learning from Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Let's see if I can figure out what their secrets are, and we'll see. Maybe I get into a couple of games. Andy makes me look good, and I can cash for a bigger payday on the other end. So this is a step back to make more money going forward, or is this just nobody else wanted the guy, and that's where the Chiefs are at now? Pure savings at the backup quarterback spot when you got a 1 year, $1.3 million backup.
I think that it's not that no one wanted him. I mean, they signed him relatively early in free agency, right? It wasn't that he's not like Teddy Bridgewater right now, who doesn't have a job because he's priced himself out. But no, I think he's just like Chad Henne, right? And we've seen Chad Henne, Matt Moore. We've seen with Andy Reid, like if he has to scheme the guy up for 2 games or a drive, he's able to do that. Even Henne played well in that Week 17 game against San Diego like 2 years ago. So like I have no problem with Blaine Gabbert. Blaine Gabbert played behind Brady. Now he gets to play behind Mahomes, or not play, but sit. Sounds like a great life.
Yeah. What do you think? Blaine Gabbert as your number 2. Are you okay with that? Are you convinced he's going to hold off Shane Buechele? Hang on. I got to look at the depth chart, make sure I said the right. I didn't say his dad. Yeah. Okay. Shane Buechele. Are you sure he's going to hold him off? Should we be keeping a long, hard look at Chris Oladokun? Who's the full quarterback?
I feel like they got the best possible deal they could get, because pretty good chance someone like Blaine Gabbert would be more than happy to stay on this roster at that price, both because he can get another ring, or he didn't get a ring with the Bucks,
did 2020.
Yeah. 2020. Okay, get another ring, and he's also close to home. I mean, so I think that has value too when you're an older quarterback and you want to be able to, be close to the people you love and see your family. So yeah, it's funny because when we talked about this, I was thinking like, what's the pool of quarterbacks like Blaine Gabbert out there anyway that you would choose from? There's probably like 4 or 5 guys in the whole league who have his level of experience and his level of athletic ability who could step in and run your offense if you needed them to, right? There's only Teddy Bridgewater, maybe a couple other guys.
I'm wondering if like now with the new rule that if they will, when's the last time they truly tried to develop a third string quarterback, Petro?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times they're
Tyler Bray.
I continue to think at some point they're going to get a guy that can run to be the short yardage guy, but the hell do I know? I mean, I would do it if you're not going to quarterback sneak with Mahomes. Get somebody like I honestly, and I will say that Gabbert was a good runner at Missouri.
Yeah,
he's a big guy, and so that's one thing I do like is I'm kind of optimistic that he will come in and run the quarterback sneak because they're 3rd and 1 dive play to the fullback. They've gotten rid of the fullback, so who's going to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that's one of the best things I like about the list of quarterbacks. I don't think Buechele's going to do it. I think Buechele and Gabbert is a competition because I don't think they're going to carry 3. I think it's time for Buechele to either win that or time for them to move on. Do you think they're going to?
Well, why wouldn't they carry 3 if the league's going to give them that extra spot on game day now again?
Well, I mean, because as we know, they're bringing it out on kick returns. We'll get to special teams much later, but we know every one of those.
But that position, it's
very valuable.
That position's not a what?
Every one of those kick cover and kick returns.
But that position's an emergency. Like you can't just dress that guy and play him at like Vice or something. It's back to the old rule where I think he can't enter the game until quarter 4 unless 2 guys get hurt and then they're in like that. So I think that they'll keep 3 because the league incentivizes them to do so now.
Okay. So then everybody will have 3.
I mean, I think it'll go back to 2010 numbers where like 2/3.
But don't they have to be on the practice squad? And then they're available. They're active.
I think it's a 53-man position.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was like you got to designate a quarter like everyone.
It's an inactive player. So meaning like that player, if you look at the game book, is inactive third quarterback.
Yeah, he can become active. Yeah.
And then if they go into the game before, it's the whole Caleb Haney NFC title game thing where Todd Collins had to play for 2 snaps, but because if they would have put Haney off a quarterback 3, then both guys would have been ineligible. Like they took that position away in 2011. And then, as you said, a bunch of teams started playing special teams guys as the 46th guy. And now they're making a 47th guy, and that 47th guy has got that old position.
All right. So you expect 3 quarterbacks, Buechele.
I expect the Chiefs to carry 3, yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for us. A lot more to break down. We'll break down all the positions in the coming weeks and, of course, all the news that's coming out of training camp. Remember, we're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized pavement and paving maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in KC all the way back, almost 20 years now. No commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. If your business has problems with its parking lot, go to GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com. For Jeff Chadiha, the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.